Well, I've had many great days. Practically every day is great. But in the early years of my saxophone playing back in the 30s and early 40s, the guy that inspired me the most and inspired many, many people terrifically, and that was Louis Armstrong, and he was my idol. He was playing in a place called the Tick-Tock in Boston in March of 1944, and a friend of mine, Mayo Duca, was a terrific trumpet player, played just like Louis, only he was a little Italian guy, but he also loved Louis. And they used to correspond with each other. Louis would write Mayo letters from all over the world. Louis always wrote with his typewriter with green ink in the ribbon on canary yellow paper. So when Louis was in Boston in 1944, of course, Mayo looked Louis up, and somehow or other they ended up in my house. Louis Armstrong, his girl singer, Velma Middleton, his valet, Doc Pugh, and another one of his trumpet players. I always remember his name because it was rather a strange name. His name was Jose Sapp. And we sat around and listened to Louis Armstrong records and drank some wine. I think we smoked a little grass back in those days because everybody knows Louis smoked marijuana in his entire life. And we didn't see too much wrong with that, so my living room was rather blue with smoke. And I ended up cooking eggs, scrambled eggs and potatoes for everybody. I can't quite remember what we talked about, but Louis was interested in all the records of himself that I had. I had about maybe 50 or 60 7 to 8 RPM records. I had them all cataloged. And 3,000 miles away over here in San Diego, and 8 years later, 1952, Louis was playing down at the Trianon on Broadway in San Diego. And I had a date that night with this gal, and we went down. We stood in front of Louis' orchestra. But I was not about to go up to Louis after 8 years and say, "Hey, Louis, you remember me back in Boston, Malden?" So anyway, I finally was getting ready to leave the dance, and I decided I wouldn't embarrass him by seeing if he knew who I was. And some guy across, just going to walk down the stairs to leave the place, and I heard this guy yell, "Hey, Bob!" Well, it turns out he's yelling at me. He came over and threw his arms around me and said, "How you doing, man?" It happened to be Doc Pugh, the valet. He said, "You go out in the back room and say hello to Pops?" I said, "No, man, he wouldn't remember me," and all that sort of thing. Anyway, he took me by the arm, brought me backstage, and there's Barney Bigard sitting over there, and there's Louis sitting over in the corner. And as I came in through the door, don't forget now, this is 8 years gone by. He only knew me for 9 hours. And he looks at me and he says, "Hello, Bob." He says, "You even remembered anything about it, you know." But speaking of one of my best nights, most memorable, was Louis Armstrong coming to my house, 32 Morris Street, Malden, Massachusetts. I just lived in a little bungalow there, nothing fancy. But Louis was just like the man next door or something like that. He just very casual. In fact, everybody was, and everybody had a nice time. We ate the scrambled eggs, and that was it. Oh, by the way, when Louis left, he gave me a little envelope, little brown envelope, and I wondered what's all this all about. And I opened it up. It was 6 big fat marijuana joints. I said, "Thank you very much." And anyway, life is still a gas, and Louis is still beautiful.